Imagine a group of Republicans armed with a massive spending bill, ready to cut everything except what they really love: jets, defense, and a few family-friendly secrets they hope you don't uncover. What could possibly go wrong? Well, buckle up, because this is going to get hilariously messy. What do you get when you mix a bunch of Republicans, a spending bill, and zero cooperation? Spoiler alert: a government shutdown, wild budget cuts, and maybe a few behind-the-scenes family values moments that could raise a few eyebrows. But hey, they're totally about that family life. Unless it's at the bar with someone who definitely isn't their spouse. Oh, and don't forget the Jets. House Republicans, fresh off their very successful family value campaign, have unveiled a 99-page spending bill. The bill's goal? Keep the government funded through September 30th. Simple, right? Well, in typical fashion, they're pushing this thing forward like a new club that says don't ask, don't tell about budget cuts. But hey, they're definitely telling us about the defense budget. And don't forget to mention those tax cuts. They're family-friendly. After all, unless your definition of family gets a little fluid after 9 p.m. But here's the kicker. They're daring Democrats to oppose it. Yep, you heard that right. They're begging for a shutdown like it's a high school dare. Go ahead, vote against it. We double dare you. It's like playing Monopoly with a group that's already hiding their secret stash of get-out-of-jail-free cards. Now, about the bill, $892.5 billion for defense, just a little bump, nothing too extravagant, and about $708 billion for non-defense spending. But it's 8% lower than last year. They're cutting everything except defense. You know, because when you're so committed to family values, nothing says family like pumping up the defense budget and trimming those other pesky programs that actually help families. But don't worry, they'll have enough military-grade jets to make sure no one goes hungry on the battlefield. Speaker Mike Johnson is already teeing up the bill for a vote, not waiting for Democrats to ruin the fun. And why should he? After all, they're just trying to keep the family together, one flight to the next undisclosed location at a time. But here's where it gets really juicy. Trump is backing it. Yep, the same guy who's always been very vocal about his deep commitment to the family unit, especially when it's just him and a very special guest. Trump's social media is blowing up with "Let's get this bill done." Though some would say that sounds more like the opening line of a questionable family reunion invitation than a rallying cry for budget negotiations. But let's not forget the real stars of the show, Representative Ralph Norman, who's never voted for a continuing resolution, but suddenly he's all in. "I trust Trump to fix the budget," he says, as if his idea of fixing things involves less community programs and a little more community service, if you catch my drift. Meanwhile, Representative Chip Roy is talking about freezing the budget for 6 months to identify more cuts. We're guessing the cuts will mostly be aimed at anything that could help the less fortunate. But hey, they'll have plenty of jets to show for it, as the bill is teed up for a vote. Speaker Johnson starts channeling his inner daredevil. "We're going solo on this," he says, a sly grin creeping across his face as he prepares for a showdown. He's like that kid in class who insists on doing a group project alone, even though everyone knows it'll end in disaster. The difference here? If it's a disaster, we all get a front row seat to the mess. And then, of course, there's a matter of the special guests who have always played a pivotal role in the Republican Party. The backroom deals, the family values, wink, wink, that somehow seem to be more about vacations and family reunions. Rumor has it that some of the bill's most vocal supporters have had their own private moments, probably involving a few too many drinks, some very close bipartisan handshakes, and a phone call to someone who's definitely not their spouse. But hey, let's not judge. After all, they're the champions of family values, right? Republicans, of course, insist they're doing all of this for the greater good of the American family. Well, the American military family, at least. They've got jets. They've got defense contracts. They've got tax cuts for the wealthiest 1%. What more could you want? And they'll gladly remind you that the poor, they can always pull themselves up by their bootstraps. If they're lucky, those bootstraps will be funded by the military budget. They just bumped up. Then there's a glorious future ahead where Republicans can stop wasting time on boring old things like social safety nets and put all their energy into, you guessed it, raising the debt ceiling. Because if there's one thing Republicans love more than trimming spending for everyone except defense contractors, it's debt. The more they raise the ceiling, the more room they have to avoid paying attention to all those social programs that really do something. But don't worry, they're still working to make things right. There's always a plan, right? And that plan involves flying a few more billion-dollar jets, cutting funding for social programs, and maybe, just maybe, slipping a few extra earmarks into their own pockets when no one's looking. Because, family values. Democratic leaders are already sounding the alarm. This bill will gut vital programs for families, says Senator Patty Murray. It's a disaster. But Republicans are like, gut it? Nah, we're just doing some creative budgeting and, a little rearranging. They'll tell you that Social Security and Medicare are fine because, hey, those are on autopilot. So no need to worry about them unless you're someone who thinks autopilot means you don't have to check the gas gauge. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer is more cautious in his reaction, suggesting that they've been burned too many times by bipartisan deals that have gone sour. But really, when it comes down to it, he knows what's at stake. He can already hear the whispers of Republicans rubbing their hands together, gleefully waiting to pull a few more strings behind the scenes to make sure their own pockets stay full while everyone else gets, well, nothing. Meanwhile, on the House floor, Republicans are trying to muscle through the bill, with Speaker Johnson holding his breath and crossing his fingers that they won't lose the votes of their own party members. After all, with a mere 218 to 214 majority, every vote matters. So when Trump says, let's get this done, the message is clear. If you don't pass this bill, you're the one who's going to get shut out. And don't think for a second that he's not watching. And with the clock ticking down, it looks like Republicans will keep daring Democrats, taunting them with the prospect of shutdown, daring them to risk looking like the party that doesn't support defense funding. It's a game of chicken on Capitol Hill. But if the Republicans win, they can keep everything they love, military spending, tax cuts, and a whole lot of private jets, while trimming everything else that doesn't directly feed their agenda. In the end, it's all part of their grand strategy. More defense, less everything else, and a whole lot of family values behind closed doors. It's a plan so full holes. Even Swiss cheese is jealous. But hey, who needs a balanced budget when you got all those family connections to fall back on? Well, that's all the misinformation we got for today. Folks, if you enjoyed this deep dive into the wrong end of the pool, hit that like button so hard. Even your ex will feel it. Don't forget to subscribe, ring the bell, because nothing says I have my life together like notifications about things you don't need to know. Stay factually incorrect, and I'll see you next time. Unless I've accidentally got some facts right, then I'm out.